We are live at 5. Welcome, everyone, to Live at 5. Tonight, we'll be talking about mentoring and specifically mentoring girls to help them be all they can be. Our theme is Be My Valentine versus Be My Mentor. What next gen girls are choosing? I'm Adam Mendler, host of 30-Minute Mentors, and I'm here tonight with two very special guests. Illana Raia, founder and CEO of Etre Girls. Illana is also the author of the new book, The Epic Mentor Guide, Inside Advice for Girls Eyeing the Workforce, from 180 boss women who know. I'm also joined by Beth O'Connell. Beth is one of the first female executive producers at NBC News. Beth helped lead the Today Show to #1 in ratings. Illana, can you kick things off by telling our viewers tonight a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Yes, so I am the founder and CEO of Etra. It means to be in French, and the idea is to help girls figure out exactly who they want to be. Etra is a company that brings girls as young as middle school and then into high school and college directly into companies that they pick to meet female leaders face to face. So we're starting that mentor relationship early because I think today smart companies are realizing that if they want more women at the table, saving seats for girls early is a great idea.
I love it. And I'm excited to talk more about your book and to talk more about mentorship in general over the course of the next hour. But before we do, I'd love to bring Beth into the conversation. Beth, can you tell our viewers tonight a little bit about you?
Well, thank you, Adam, so very much. And Illana, it's a pleasure to join you for this important conversation about mentorship. And thank you for mentioning the Today Show, because that actually was where I did have my start just a few blocks from here at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. And it was a childhood dream realized for sure, producing the Oklahoma City bombing and the O.J. Simpson trial. And then I did go on to become one of the very first female executive producers at NBC. Tragically reporting on Princess Diana's death and 9/11 and election nights and debates. And then a friend of mine came to me with one of these about 13 years ago, and we decided we could put news and information on your cell phone. And that was a wonderful way and a confluence to produce TV for a new and an exciting new medium. And actually we had live, you had to put a little antenna on your phone back then to see the live streaming. So I guess we've come a long way since then. And then I love that entrepreneurial stuff so much, Adam. I think you'll agree with me here that I found that podcasting was really the most intimate medium that we have of all the things that I produced, radio or television or cable, that you're literally talking in somebody's ears. And Adam has a delightful and wonderful podcast, and I recommend it to all of you. And for those of us who like to do more than one thing simultaneously, you can do a 30-minute meal while you're listening to his 30-minute mentor, and it's a great experience. So, but in the last couple of years, I think a lot of us have come to the conclusion that we want to take a step back and do something that's meaningful in life. And I thank my friend Illana for having me join Etre Girls as an advisor and help a little bit with this wonderful book that she has that's coming out shortly, because I do believe of all the many things I've gotten to do in my career, mentoring and growing people along the way has been the most gratifying thing that I've been able to do.
Beth, I'm blown away. Thank you for the compliment. It's
well, I have a few more things in my background because I have a longer time at it. I guess that's so. Thank you for indulging me.
I was going to say I'm honored by the high praise you have for 30-Minute Mentors. It's an honor coming from you, given your background and given all you've accomplished in your career. So thank you.
Well, I'm a loyal listener.
I really appreciate that.
It is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. And anyone who knows anything about me knows how passionate I am about mentorship. So I'm so excited to just dive right in. And I want to know, if we'll start with Illana. You just wrote a book on mentorship. What inspired you to write this book? What inspired your passion and interest in mentorship?
So, well, thank you. I'm so excited about this book because the book really turned out to be a matching of girls' questions about the work world with answers provided by 180 amazing women. And the idea of the book came from those corporate visits I was telling you about. Originally, when I launched Etra, and that was back in 2016, it was just a website with resources and inspirational quotes from amazing women. And the more girls that started to drop into the website, the more I kept hearing, we want to meet the women. We want to see where they work. We want to ask our questions directly. And I've always said to the girls, raise your hand instead of lowering your standards. Let's go ask. So going into all of these companies, you would hear similar questions wherever we were, whether it was the stock exchange or Google or YouTube, Spotify, Morgan Stanley, NBC. Girls were asking specific things. How did you get your job? How did you know this was the right place for you? What are you allowed to ask in an interview? How did you get an internship? And I kept hearing all of those questions. And so more and more during COVID, when we couldn't go into companies for a while, I still kept getting questions from girls. And I thought we should reach out to the women and just see if they would answer. So I started getting questions from girls. And this was not just from the area in New York where the visits were happening. Now getting questions from girls in Israel and Turkey and Pakistan and India, and asking really specific things. How do I get an internship at SpaceX? And then we got a woman at SpaceX to answer. How can I get my art scene at Pixar? And we got a woman at Pixar to answer. And so stemming from those company visits, which were so impactful at such an early age, over COVID, we decided, let's just have girls ask those same questions, and we'll reach out on LinkedIn, DMing on Instagram, and we'll get answers from women. And I thought if we got 50 women, it would be incredible. And when 180 women gave amazingly candid, generous, insightful answers, putting it together in a book just seemed like the most exciting thing to do.
I'm going to cheat a little bit here because there are so many tips. There are so many mentors, 180. Can you share 3 tips, 3 takeaways that anyone watching tonight can walk away and say, this is great. I could apply this to my life. I could apply this to my career and be all that much more effective?
Absolutely. And I love that question. I loved how many women across a variety of industries talked about how if you hear no for a job application or an internship or a pivot in your career, no doesn't always mean no. It might just mean no right now. And that piece of advice came from astronauts. It came from, founders like Bobby Brown. It came from surgeons. The idea to be tenacious about what you want. And if the answer is no, it could just mean try again later or take a different path or ask a different person. I love that piece of advice. There were a lot of people that said you're not too young to do something. You're not too young to either have a mentor or ask a classical musician something, or think about jobs that might be on the International Space Station that don't even exist yet, but 5 years from now will be incredible. You're not too young. And what I love about that piece of advice is I took that to mean not just that a high school or college student isn't too young to know what she wants and seek a mentor. Women today in the workforce who are pivoting, women who, because of the pandemic, have shifted careers and changed focus. There is never a wrong time to do that. And so many of these women were talking to the girls saying, now's a perfect time. But I think for women across the board right now who are looking at their careers, now's the perfect time. No one is too old, too young, too inexperienced to find a mentor and pursue a passion. And a third piece of advice, what struck me in the book was that even the most experienced mentors had mentors. That women who are at the top of their career and you think they know everything, talked about the mentorship they had received at the cuff of someone else. And so there was a makeup artist who talked about how Tyra Banks inspired her. And then Tyra Banks is in the book talking about mentorship. So even within the 2 covers of the book, and I think what that said to me was anyone should seek a mentor, and everyone has something to teach you, and you have something to teach someone else. That there are no real fine borders around mentorship. And that was across such a wide swath of industries that struck me every time I read it.
I love each of those pieces of advice, and I can tell you one by one, they align so well with what I talk about with the leaders who I interview on my podcast, starting with the last piece of advice first, how the best leaders are those who are most dedicated to lifelong learning. The best leaders are those who have a growth mindset. No matter how successful you are, no matter how much you've accomplished, no matter how much you've achieved, if you have the mindset that I still want to learn, I still want to grow, I still want to develop, you're going to be all that much more successful. It's those that are closed off to taking that next step, no matter where they are on their journey. Those are the ones who aren't going to make it to that next level. So combining that, marrying that with the importance of having a mentor, not being able to do it alone, is so critical to success. You're never too old, you're never too young to get on the journey, whatever that journey is, the journey of self-discovery, the journey of becoming a great leader. I had a phone call today with a guy who was telling me that he felt bad about not being on any of the 30 under 30 lists, and how he got started in his industry at a quote unquote old age. And he sees all of his colleagues getting honored. And I said, man, relative to me, you're a young guy. And I'm sure people look at me and say, Adam, you're a young guy. Everything is relative. You're never too early, you're never too late. Just go after it. Today is the day. No doesn't mean no. In the context you shared, in the context of sales, in the context of accomplishing what you want to accomplish in your life and your career, this is great stuff. We can go on. We're going to blow past the hour, but I know we're not allowed to do that with this format. But what we have to do is we have to get Beth in. Beth was one of the mentors in this book, is a great mentor in life, is a mentor to so many. And Beth, I want to ask you, when you mentor other people and when you have mentored others over the years, what are some of the war stories that you've shared? What are some of the key themes that you try to impart that would be particularly relevant to viewers tonight?
I love listening to what both of you had to say, and there's so much there to share. And one of the important things that Illana and I have come across too is that 90% of people who have been mentored also go on to grow and to become a mentor themselves. And, I think that one of the things that I really found the most gratifying was really trying to get people to stretch beyond what they knew that they were capable of doing, even if they didn't think they could do it. And, at a particular time at the Today Show, when we came in, there were more set segments and they weren't as ready to react to breaking news and things. And people were kind of the go-to, you're the cooking segment person, you do the movie star, you do this. And I really tried to get people to branch out and move into other things. And there was this one young woman who often people suffer from people stereotyping her voice and her look, and that she wasn't a serious person. She was the cooking segment person. And I assigned her a 3-part series on the conspiracy theories of the John F. Kennedy assassination. And people looked at me and would say, are you serious? You're really having her do that? And I said, yeah, because I know she can do it. She doesn't think she can do it. And I know she can do it, and I'll be right there for her all along the way. And she did an exceptional job because she just thought about things differently. She had a unique perspective, and she took it on and she owned it. And she did such a fantastic job that this very high standard, as all anchors should have, but he in particular thanked her on the air for doing such an exceptional job. And after that, nobody looked at her the same. She was no longer the cooking segment producer. And those are the moments when I think you want to bring somebody along to a certain point and then encourage them, not push them, but encourage them to reach beyond what they think that they can do. And just make that something where they feel supported. And it's mentorship, it's a relationship. It's not a behavior. It's something that really has to be committed to. And it's been very gratifying that people will still call me and say, this happened. What do you think? But I think the important thing is, and I'll ask Adam and Illana this too, is I think we don't want to give them the answer. I think we want to lead them to the answer and help them to try to figure it out. as best as the situation is. I did have a circumstance where somebody did call me and say, oh, this was egregious. I think I should fire this person. And, we had a conversation about it. And then we came around to, if we point it out, I bet they'll never make that mistake again. And they'll probably be one of the best employees that you have. So it's a very long, committed relationship, and it's important. And I think you see it. I mean, Illana sees it in those young girls, and why it's important to start at a very early age.
Well, I do see what I love about what you just said is that you didn't underestimate that intern or that employee. So as a mentor, you took her seriously and you helped her stretch. And I think a great mentor-mentee relationship, it isn't always just being a cheerleader or saying, just stay doing what you're doing, this is perfect. It is challenging. It is, springboarding a little bit and taking them seriously, whether in the workplace like you did or at a young age in a boardroom, and saying, you can absolutely do this, understanding this job that this woman has as an engineer, as a neurosurgeon. This is not beyond you. I'm going to refuse to underestimate you. And I love that about the story you just said.
And that's, Adam, what's amazing and wonderful about this book. I think that one of the key things for young women and girls for mentorship too is to get them to expand their horizons about the possibilities. A lot of young girls may not think about being an astronaut or a neurosurgeon, but they can in this book, and they'll see how it's possible. And, even going back to my Today Show, when I say it was a childhood dream realized, it was. And we used to watch the Today Show when we were kids. And I remember 11 years old, I vividly remember turning to my mom and say, someday I'm going to do that. And it was because Barbara Walters was anchoring that show. So I had no idea that a woman couldn't be part of a TV news show. And those are the moments where we want to get to, where the Hoda Kotb and Savannah Guthrie aren't the first two women to anchor out the show, that it just is what it is, that it isn't the first anymore. But we have to mentor up.
I recently did an interview with a very well-known former CEO. The episode is going to run in a couple of weeks. And one of the questions I asked him was, what is your best advice for leaders on how to build truly diverse and inclusive topics? We're running up against the break, so I can't give the full answer, but I will give one small piece, which is representation matters. And with that, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors, and we'll see you back in a couple minutes. To anyone watching, to anyone listening, don't compare yourself to other people. Don't compare yourself to other entrepreneurs. Don't compare yourself to other people who are doing similar things to what you're doing, because you just can't. Not only is it not healthy, but it's not accurate. You don't really know what other people are going through in their lives. You don't really know what other people are going through in their careers. You don't really know what other people are going through in their businesses. All you can really do is focus on yourself and be your best self. Welcome back. Who was that guy?
He was great.
That was the first question. That's the first question for our panelists tonight. Who was that guy? It's kind of a variation of the Paul Newman, Robert Redford. Who are these guys? I'll ask a different question if no one wants to tackle that one. What can anyone do to find a great mentor?
What can anyone do?
How can anyone find a great mentor?
I'll jump into that first. I think, you can segment that into where you are in your career. So let's start with someone who's in a company where there is a mentorship platform already in place. And either in your practice area or there are people who do that which you admire and you know who to go to. I think within a company, you can use things like someone's writing, someone's podcast, something that someone's already done and they've contributed value and say, that really meant something to me. Could I email you a question? Could we, not a lifelong relationship, please be my mentor right off the bat. I don't think that ever works. But something where you are expressing interest in what they do and asking for their expertise is a very natural give and take. You can send something else that you've seen written. This made me think of you. I saw you on this program and I thought you would enjoy this. Something where there's a mutual give and take of value within a company, I think always helps and helps it become an organic, mutually beneficial relationship. I think if you're talking about next gen girls, which is the space that I play in, some of the advice is the same. There are people who do the thing you want to do and they're already fantastic at it. And there is nothing wrong with reaching out by email, DMing, LinkedIn, if you are of age and you have that, to say, I love what you do and I want to learn more about it. Could I email you 2 questions? Could I DM you 1 question? Such a light lift that it's really hard to say no. Just judging by the women who said yes to be in a book they didn't know anything about because they were answering girls' questions, most women in senior positions in any industry I am finding remember what it's like to stand in the high tops of a girl in middle school or high school, and they remember what that feels like. And I just don't think it's out of line or inappropriate ever, respectfully and safely. I mean, you're a young person doing this safely, vetting it if you're very young through teachers or your parents. But in any case, reaching out and saying, I don't need to meet you in person right now, but I'd love to learn more about what you do and I have some questions. I think the gentle ask is a really easy, natural way to go. And that just gets expanded as you get into college and you start looking at internships. Mentors are everywhere. They might be in your office. It might be remote right now, and that's okay. They might be on the page. They might be on a screen or on a podcast. But reaching out with a light ask and an authentic feel for what they do, to me, is the first step always.
Beth, I'll let you dive in. What advice do you have?
I think advice is the key word, actually, Adam. I think that people do respond to that. And I think if you put in the subject line to me or to anyone, just a moment of your time for a piece of advice, I have 1 question.
Right.
I often say that there's a fine line between persistence and being obnoxious and finding it. And I think if you know what you want, go for it. You are responsible for your own personal development, and it's at various ages and various stages. You're going to need. I don't think one role model or one mentor is enough in life because not one person is going to be able to answer all of the many questions that you have. So you have to build a team of a network of people and be respectful of their time. And never over ask. I think that it's been remarkable, the women that have responded in the book. I mean, I keep thinking about how I'm amazed that there's a woman in the book who checks the weather for NASA before anything happens. I mean, it's just such a great thing. For what girl would ever think that that's a thing that you can do, right? So I think you just got to ask. I mean, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And just be always respectful and have a clear ask also. I think the thing about mentorship also is that it puts some clarity around the relationship. And there's a difference between a role model and a mentor. You know, I can think that Jacinda Ardern is an incredible role model, and that, you know, women leaders have done such an incredible job leading countries during COVID and what she's done, but she's not going to be my mentor. Mentor, you need to have somebody you can actually build a relationship, and I hope go to lunch to soon, and not be virtually. I wish we could all be together today, but you know, I think you just have to be consistent and persistent, but in a respectful way.
You know, Beth, it's interesting you say that, because I've asked a number of guests on my podcast about this topic. How can anyone find a great mentor? What are your best tips on the topic of mentorship? For the record, my podcast is not a podcast purely focused on mentorship. The idea is I'm bringing on the most successful people in the country and having them for 30 minutes serve as mentors to listeners. And when I get into this topic with all kinds of guests, I get all kinds of advice. And some of the guests who are among the most successful people in the country have actually shared, I don't want to use the word opposite advice to what you shared, Beth, but somewhat conflicting advice, in that they've said their best mentors are people who they've never met. I did an interview with a highly successful newscaster, the first woman of color to be the solo anchor of a morning television show, Adrienne Banker. And I asked Adrienne about her success and about her advice on mentorship. And what she told me is the best mentor she's ever had is Oprah Winfrey, who she's never met. But she studied everything about Oprah Winfrey. She's read all of Oprah Winfrey's books. She's listened to Oprah Winfrey's talks. And by osmosis, she's learned so much through Oprah. I have a guest coming up. I did an interview with a member of the Forbes 400 list. He's a CEO of one of the most successful retailers in America. And what he shared with me is, yes, to your point, Beth, he has had a great mentor in his life, who is someone a mutual connection of ours. But he said, you don't need to have that. That was incredibly helpful to me in my career, in my journey, in my life. But if you don't have that, if you don't have what I have, you could instead have what I've also had, which is mentorship from all these people who I don't know. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Simon Sinek. Those were three names he threw out on the podcast. But the list goes on and on and on. And I want to ask you if you could maybe share your thoughts with viewers tonight on that point. Do you need to have a one-on-one connection? Can you be mentored indirectly? Do you recommend that people have sort of a portfolio of mentors, where you have one mentor who's a life mentor, one mentor who's a business mentor, one mentor who might be a spiritual mentor? And I'll open this up to you, Illana, as well. We can make this a free-for-all. Would love to get your thoughts on this topic.
Yes, I think absolutely that we need more than one mentor in life. And I hear what you're saying, and I think that's right. I mean, I think we've all been inspired by Oprah Winfrey and Steve Jobs, and listened to master classes and learned. I guess my different point was just that I'm not being able to pick up the phone and call them and ask them a specific question. So I think that's right. I think it's a team, and we're responsible to have a team, and you need what mentorship you need at that particular moment. It's not the same thing that you're going to need 5 years from now, or that you needed 10 years ago. So I do agree with that.
I think that's a great point. And I actually heard that podcast episode that you're talking about, where she was talking about Oprah. And what I loved so much was when she said that she thinks of mentors as tour guides. And I thought that was so fantastic, on the idea of a career journey or a life journey, to have someone be the tour guide. And whether you know that person personally, or as you say, you simply read everything she's ever written, or you ask one question and you got one answer, and that was a mentor moment, which is a little bit how I think of the book. Or if it's simply someone where you listen to the podcast and you gain wisdom every time and you're following those directions and you're inspired and empowered by it. All of these are ways that you can be mentored and then in turn mentor someone else. But I did love her reference to a tour guide. One thing I think distinguishes mentors is that they are putting themselves out there voluntarily to either be listened to or be followed, or they're saying, please follow me and engage with me. One thing I thought was special about the women in the book was that every one of them gave her preferred social media handle and said to girls, connect with me, ask me more questions, DM me. I want this to be an ongoing relationship. I'm not just answering one question in a vacuum. I actually want to be seen as a mentor. And the people who enjoyed mentorship in their career, and as Beth said, so many people who had mentors go on to mentor others, when they're offering themselves out that way in a masterclass or on a podcast, anything like that, I think that makes it especially valuable because they have said, I'm thinking about this in a mentorship, through a mentorship lens, and that's different.
I love it, and thank you for listening to 30-Minute Mentors.
Yeah.
If you enjoy the podcast, please rate, review, help spread the word. But
subscribe below. But Adam, with all and you have an amazing cadre of guests and CEOs, but have you found that they incorporate mentorship programs in their companies, and do they see some tangible results from? I mean, there's a lot of statistics that prove that it is incredibly beneficial. So I'm wondering, in reality, do they have mentorship programs?
Yes. So I would say that a lot of companies are very big believers in mentorship formally. However, a lot of the guests who I bring on who are major leaders of major companies say, we don't really believe in formal mentorship. We don't think that mentorship comes by forcing two people together. And in my own personal experience, that's the school that I subscribe to. I don't believe that someone can tell you this person is going to be your mentor. And in my life, I've been a part of those programs where I've been assigned mentors. It doesn't work that way. Your mentor is someone who comes to you organically. Now, that isn't to say that you are going to go to sleep one night and wake up the next morning and God is going to bring you a mentor. It takes work. It takes effort. You have to be proactive. You have to reach out. Anyone who may have listened to a couple of episodes of my podcast, there are great stories of guests who have been incredibly proactive in seeking out people who they thought would be great mentors, and then they became great mentors to them. So you need to be aggressive. You need to take that first step. You can't be afraid. Got to be fearless. But it boils down to having a common bond with the person who you think can be a great mentor to you. We talked about this earlier. I forget the exact context, but the point was made, and it's so important. You can't walk up to a stranger and say, will you be my mentor? It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You need to develop a relationship with someone. It has to be a genuine relationship. And we can go on and on about this topic. This is something that I love talking about. With that said, we really can't go on and on about this topic without taking a break first. So we're going to run to commercial. Before we run to commercial, I want to let viewers know that if you have any questions for us, throw them into the chat. We really want to hear from you. And with that, we'll see you on the other side.
There are tons of people who say all the time, I have no regrets. I live life with no regrets.
Yeah.
And I think that those people are either lying or are intellectually dishonest. I don't know how anyone could live life with no regrets.
Yeah.
I have plenty of regrets. I regret things every day.
Yeah.
I regret not being here early and having to hustle over to the studio. So there are plenty of things that I regret.
Yeah.
But with that said, I think it's important to learn from things that you wish you would have done differently instead of dwelling in the past.
Yeah.
And you can't change the past. All you can do is learn from previous experiences and use them to control your destiny and to have better experiences going forward.
We are back, and we're back for our last segment. So let's make this a good one. Let's make it count. And another quick reminder, if anyone has any questions for us, now's the time. Throw it into the chat. And I'm going to start off with one of the questions in the chat. For fathers with daughters, how can they sell their teenage daughters on mentors and the value of having mentors?
Oh, I will jump right into this. To me, when I was starting Etra and I really wanted to connect girls to mentors, I knew that I couldn't be the one suggesting the companies. Before I started Etra, I was a mergers and acquisitions attorney at a big law firm in New York, and I loved it. I was the happiest lawyer. And I thought about floating the idea to the girls, do you want to visit a law firm? Do you want to see what, corporate law looks like? And I mean, crickets. I had no takers. When we started leaning into the companies where the girls had an interest, they use the product, they have a brand affinity that's pre-existing, they know about it and they want to know more, then the idea of let's go meet a mentor suddenly took shape. So for me, the girls drive every company we visit, any woman that we interview, any pop-up virtual mentorship that we do, the girls are in the driver's seat. I do not take them anywhere they don't want to go. And it leads us to really interesting places. In the book, it was the same thing. I couldn't believe the number of questions I got about certain industries. I didn't anticipate it at all. So it was a blast to go and find the women to answer the questions. But for fathers with daughters, and they hear you saying mentor and they think that it's some big corporate structure and it doesn't apply to them at all. A mentor is simply an expert in the thing that you want to do. And if you've got a teenage athlete, saying to her, why don't we talk to a collegiate player or a pre-Olympic player or an Olympic player? She was exactly where you were. She remembers what it's like to be nervous for tryouts, to lace up her cleats, to get out there. Let's go speak with her. To say to someone, that woman that you're going to meet hated raising her hand in class, hated it exactly like you do. This isn't me saying it. That woman now works at Google. She's an engineer. Let's go meet the team she leads, most of whom, by the way, are men. There's a coolness factor to the companies that I think resonates with the girls. And the minute they get in the door and they see themselves reflected in that boardroom, they see someone who looks like me, sounds like me, came from where I came from, understands what I'm saying. I don't think you have to sell them on it at all. I think it becomes so baked in and so natural. And I've seen girls who were so reticent on the bus, or a father will pull me aside and say, she's really shy, she's not going to ask a lot of questions, I don't know how it's going to go. That's the girl who won't put her hand down in the boardroom because she has 10,000 questions. And here's a panel of women taking her seriously and answering them. You will not have to sell her. It's just leaning into that which she's already interested in.
Beth, do you have any thoughts, anything to add, share?
Well, I think that is the key is that they stood and waited to see who was on the cut list for the varsity team or the JV team, just like you did. I mean, that they had that same fear and trepidation as as you may, and it's okay. And look where they are now. I mean, it is the best way to engage them in that. And I think that it's just so crucial. I mean, it's staggering to me when I first started collaborating with Illana that 30%, or that girls between the ages of 9 and 13 lose 30% of their self-confidence still at this stage. I mean, it's just remarkable. So we need to find these ways to boost their self-confidence. And that's through sports. I mean, we played sports growing up. I think it was great becoming team players. But it's having coaches and people who will guide you along the way.
Right. These are the early mentors.
Yeah.
A coach is an early mentor, helping you get better at what you want to do, introducing you to other teams, other players, other leagues. This is an early version of a mentor. And I think that's true. Beth's stat is entirely right. And also by the age 14, girls are quitting their sports at twice the rate of boys. Now, there might be a myriad of reasons why, but maybe the job isn't to figure out why it's happening, but to figure out how we close that confidence gap through mentorship, whether it's in a locker room or a classroom or a boardroom.
And we know for sure that mentorship helps improve confidence. I mean, my Today Show producer is a perfect example of that. I think, Adam, to your point too about this corporations and mentorship, it's one thing to have the program because there's definitely statistical information that says productivity improves, that people go along and they get promoted, they're happier, it helps with retention, it helps with minority representation, which is also exceedingly important. But it isn't, and I agree with your point though, to match people just on paper is not going to work. And I do give NBC a ton of credit. At one point in time when I was there, they started a executive leadership mentorship program. And I was paired with an amazing senior vice president of one of our film companies. And it was fantastic. And we had great conversations. We committed to our relationship, but he was never going to be able to help me when I walked into the all-male staff meeting and they were all talking about how Tiger Woods won the tournament the day before, and they stopped talking because I walked into the room. You know, there is a different level of what may be needed at the time. So I think, but there's definitely proof that it works, and I hope that I'm very optimistic with all of the diversity and inclusion and hiring that's happening, that it's going to really be more than just a box that's being checked. It's not it's a nice to have or good for optics. It really is something that's going to work and help the bottom line, which there's also statistical proof that it is more profitable for companies as well.
Yeah, Beth, to your point, I think it really comes down to designing the right mentorship program, because all too often it is about checking a box, even though the individual who creates the mentorship program has the absolute best of intentions. In actuality, in execution, it doesn't exactly work out the way that it's intended. The devil is in the details. So to ultimately have a mentorship program that leads to real mentorship, it's not about pairing two people up and saying, you're this person's mentor, you're this person's mentee, go at it. It's being incredibly thoughtful about who the two people are that are being paired with one another. Who is the mentor? Who is the mentee? And in the right companies, you're getting paired with multiple mentors. And in the right companies, you're getting paired with mentors, and that mentor might not be your mentor forever. That mentor might not be your mentor for more than a couple months. That mentor could be your mentor forever. But it really comes down to designing the right program and having a program that's extremely mindful of the fact that it comes down to having authentic relationships. Like we talked about earlier, for a successful mentor-mentee relationship to flourish, it all comes down to both parties authentically wanting to be there, wanting to participate, wanting to engage. You can't pay someone to be a mentor.
Right.
You can't pay someone to be a mentee. This is volunteer work. And you're only going to volunteer for something if you want to do it. And you might volunteer for something, but not give it your all. You're only going to give it your all if you're really in. So much of it comes down to the strategy behind it and doing it the right way.
And it can, and I think should be a two-way street too. I mean, mentorship is a relationship, absolutely. And I think there's an opportunity too. We did a piece that was just so sweet in the end, and it was about reverse mentorship. And I think there's such an opportunity for that now. And it really came about Tom Brokaw, who is insatiably curious, asked me what we were up to at one day, and I said, we're trying to figure out what we can do with Twitter. And he said, I want to hear more about that. I want to learn more about that. And it was one of the best pieces. It was so sweet. We had one of my 20-year-old, they can produce, they can write, they can edit, they can shoot, who's technically so adept, sitting with the man who's interviewed every living president for the last 50 years, teaching him how to tweet. And, but there's a space for that. There's a role in companies. And to that father who asked, how do I engage my daughter? I mean, that's a great place to go. She could go to Google if she wants to. And, it's, there's just an opportunity all the way around. And
there's a huge space for that. And it's growing every day. I mean, look how many companies now need a TikTok presence. And they need someone from the next generation to come in and, as you say, reverse mentor up to say, this is how we do it. This will be effective. I love your brand. Here's what I see. They're more than just a small focus group now. There are positions for young people everywhere for stuff like this, for companies looking to get into the metaverse, for that next step where we don't know what those jobs are going to look like yet, but we do know that the next generation has the skills native to it. There's going to be more and more opportunity, not just for peer mentorship, but for mentoring up. It's fantastic.
And that's your book.
We hope.
But the questions came from the girls. It wasn't that we thought, these are the questions that we need to answer and let's go out and find people to answer them. They came from the girls.
Right. And they were, some of them were very concrete. As I said, how do I get this job? What did you major in college? Like, tell me your blueprint to land where you landed. Some of them were incredibly profound questions. How do I ask about inclusivity in an interview? How do I know for real that a company cares about diversity and inclusion, and that is their culture that's going to grow with my career? These are deep, thoughtful questions for girls in high school and college. And the women who answered them were really genuine and gave granular, important answers. So all of those things are, the next generation cares, right? We talked about the title for this segment being Be My Valentine or Be My Mentor. Next gen girls want mentors, and they have their eyes squarely on what the workforce is going to look like. And through a pandemic, I think they saw perhaps their mothers, their aunts, their neighbors at work more closely than they ever have. You talk about how many women were working from home during this pandemic, and women were meeting the moment, but girls were meeting mentors in a whole new way. And so I think that's interesting, and girls more and more understand why they're going to need a mentor, and the fact that they might be able to get it sooner is encouraging for them.
Girls need mentors, guys need mentors, everyone needs mentors. I love what you shared about reverse mentoring. I think that something that is often overlooked is the importance of reciprocality in the mentor-mentee relationship. The best relationships between mentors and mentees are just like all great relationships. It's not about one side giving and one side taking. It's about both sides benefiting. And I personally benefited greatly from this conversation tonight. This was so much fun. Thank you, Illana. Thank you, Beth. Thank you to everyone who joined us. And with that, we're going to wrap things up. Be sure to tune in again every month on the third Thursday for more Live at 5.
Thank you, Adam.